here in Module 1, we're going to talk about the scope of the rest of the term, really, in terms of what alcohol and drug policy research is, and then briefly cover who's actually involved in this policy making, because that can be just as important as the policies themselves. So, what is alcohol and drug policy? Well, it really encompasses all of the laws, all of the programs, all of the regulations, and even all of the court cases that's designed to influence substance use, whether that's decreasing consumption itself or decreasing the negative consequences of substance use. Now, typically, we're talking about things that prohibit purchase and sale of a product, prohibit the production of a product, prohibit distribution and possession of a product, depending if we're talking about a legal substance or an illegal substance. But for all of these different parts of this chain between growing and producing a product to actual substance use, there are laws, programs, and regulations that attempt to regulate each part of this process. Now, in general, policy really is an upstream way to prevent disease. We're not trying to treat disease. We're not trying to use policy necessarily to prevent diseases from occurring a second time. We're really trying to prevent people from consuming a substance for the first time and then preventing all of those downstream consequences of that use. But even within this policymaking, even though all policy is really considered a very upstream method towards prevention, there are more direct policies and more indirect policies depending on what we're worried about. So take drunk. There are direct policies that specifically aim to prevent drunk driving. These are things like blood alcohol concentration limits, which range from 0.08 to 0.05 in the United States. Zero tolerance laws, essentially saying that anybody under the legal purchase age should have no alcohol in their system at all. There's administrative license suspension, so if you get caught drunk driving, you automatically have your license suspended. And then things like warning labels to prevent people or try to prevent people from drunk driving. And these are all directly related to drunk driving. There's really no alternative thing for these things to be impacting on. But then you have indirect policies. Now, these indirect policies, when we're talking about drunk driving, are intended to decrease alcohol consumption itself. And then the assumption is that if we decrease alcohol consumption, we'll subsequently decrease all of the consequences of alcohol consumption, including drunk driving. So these are things like increased taxes, liability laws, media campaigns, the minimum drinking age laws. All of those are put in place not to impact drunk driving necessarily, but to impact alcohol consumption. And then we hope that there's a downstream consequence of these indirect policies towards reduced drunk driving. And we can even go one step further. This is actually one step even further upstream. These are very good terminology, right? Very indirect policies. So these are the ones that are trying to create a positive environment so that the environment is conducive to healthy behavioral decisions, so that people are not making poor health behavior decisions and feel comfortable making positive health behavior decisions. They don't have to worry about other things in their lives, so they feel like they can actually do this pretty easily. These are things like anti-poverty programs, welfare programs, work programs, trying to bring people out of the lower socioeconomic statuses and into the middle and high income, high socioeconomic status groups. And then ultimately, by putting these programs in place, we can reduce alcohol consumption. That's kind of a downstream impact of these policies. And then decreased alcohol consumption will hopefully decrease drunk driving prevalence. So 3 types of policies that we can really put into place to influence substance use. We can have these direct policies, we can have these indirect policies, we can have these very indirect policies. But who is actually doing the policy making? Who's actually making these policies and regulations? So first are the policymakers themselves. These are your senators, your representatives, basically anybody who you elect to office. These are also the regulators within the executive agency. So these are people at the national level in the United States. These could be people at the Federal Trade Commission, at the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Commission agency, at the FDA, at many other federal level agencies. These can also be people at the local departments of public health or state departments of public health. These can be law enforcement agencies, particularly when we're talking about illicit substances. And then it can be judges. So if a case is brought before the court, a judge can rule in favor or against the constitutionality of a law, and they can actually overturn the regulations and laws passed by our elected and unelected regulators. Now, the industries that profit from certain substances. Now, when we're talking about industries here, we're really focusing on the legal drugs, so alcohol, tobacco, now marijuana in many countries. They're involved in policymaking through lobbying. So the producers of these products, the distributors, the retailers of these products, will all come together, create trade associations, and actually lobby for rules and regulations and laws that favor the industry, typically over public health. Now, sometimes the industries, the producers, the distributors, and retailers will lobby on their own behalf. Other times, they'll band together and create these trade organizations, sometimes known as SAPROs, Social Aspect Public Relations Organizations, to kind of give a coordinated message. So the beer industry, for instance, has 3 different trade associations in the United States. The manufacturers who principally produce beer belong to the U.S. Beer Institute. You have the liquor companies belonging to the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, and then you have the large wine producers being a part of the Wine Institute. And this is very common in many countries where they do band together, have a coordinated message and a coordinated response to public health policy interventions. And then finally, the individuals themselves, us, can become involved and should become involved in alcohol and drug policy, when we advocate for different laws, we advocate for different regulations, we advocate for implementation of different programs. That is part of the policy making process. Now, we can do that as individuals, we can do that through nonprofit associations we might support, but in either case, it functions as a pushback against those industry lobbying efforts to provide regulators and provide legislators with a different point of view.